Hi, everyone. Welcome to A Way of God's Remembrance with Michael Hayes. This is presented by Awake to Love. I'm Lee here with Cindy. We are the volunteer Zoom hosts and so grateful that you are here. As an introduction, I will read Michael's words to bring clarity to the focus and format of this gathering. This is a weekly gathering for those seeking greater awareness of their true nature. There are many paths and approaches to higher consciousness and to greater awakening to who we truly are. The essence, the truth of all these paths is more about remembering who we are and have always been, rather than becoming something different or more than we have seen ourselves to be. A way of God's remembrance goes to the heart, to the intention of all the paths. This is what we will explore together each week. Michael will share thoughts and awarenesses that come forward as relevant and purposeful for our time together, followed by questions and answers related to what he shares about. We will begin with an invocation of light to help support us all to be in collective alignment. After the light invocation, we will play a recording to lead us in Anai Hu chanting. Ron is sitting by. There is the request to take it away, Ron, please.
Thank you, Lee. Lord God of all creation, we come before you this evening with joy and love in our hearts. And we ask that we surrender into that awakening that we are all participating in at this time in the history of unfoldment on our home planet. We are just so grateful to have this opportunity to come together in this way and share our experiences and our realizations on our trip into further remembrance of that which we truly are. Not who we truly are, but what we truly are. So be it.
Welcome, everyone, to A Way of God's Remembrance. I'm Michael Hayes, and apparently this is the 30th one of these talks we've done in the last, I guess, what's it been now, 7 months? And that's quite an achievement. So let's see if there's anything present to talk about. There is a glory of God that lives in all of us that can never truly be repressed or suppressed or done away with, no matter how far away from truth we fall. But it can certainly be disguised to us and disguised to most other people. And this world is very powerfully designed to create forgetfulness in us. And that forgetfulness is first and foremost the forgetfulness that we are one with God and that we come from God. But more than that, that we're always with God, even as we play out this game of time and space. It's rather miraculous that God can somehow orchestrate a situation where God forgets itself, meaning we as individuations of God can forget that we come from God and forget that we're always connected to God. And it's almost like forgetting we're an appendage of God. And yet this reality we're doing all this in was created by God. So what a marvelous, strange road and journey we are in and on with this. There's a Christ messaging that comes forward to us, not as a religious offering, but as a truth manifestation, as a portrayal of truth. By they mean portrayal, meaning that the truth of God is beyond all comprehension or understanding or communication through words, but is something we can know and ultimately do know in the essence of ourselves. This messaging of Christ was all about loving and continues to be about that loving. And we can think of Jesus as a prime exampleship of this. But we can also recognize the same exampleship through many other consciousnesses that have walked this earth and shared the message of loving. And all through different traditions, we see and find this. Now, in some traditions, the words are focused a little different, like the Buddhists talk more about the compassion. But what is compassion but another word for loving? And so the one that always gives loving within us and through us is that soul, which is that extension of God into this creation. And its purpose is to dwell in all this and in the midst of all this, rediscover itself and learn how to be true to its oneness with God and to its alignment to the purpose of God, even in this dimension, even in this condition, which is totally designed to distract the soul from that truth, to bring that soul into a deep amnesia, a deep forgetting. And based on what we can see in this world, and if we were to look at the records of all the existences and all the lives of all the souls playing in this world, we realize, oh, God has been extraordinarily successful in duping itself into this forgetfulness through so many existences. And so when we talk about a way of God's remembrance, we're really talking about a relationship we have with a force of God that imbues all reality and, in a sense, interfaces with each aspect of reality, always in a process of activating remembrance of God's presence and the truth of oneness with God into every aspect of God as that aspect of God is ready to have that remembrance. And so it waits with a vigilance and a readiness. But its offering is never there to exclude any consciousness. Yet many consciousnesses exclude themselves from that offering by simply not witnessing it, not understanding its presence, not recognizing the truth of it as entirely available and entirely uh, um, activating this knowing and aliveness in consciousness. This has been known by any name, many names, through all existence. And it doesn't need to be named, but its action and its purpose is for us to embrace if we are truly ready to come into this remembrance of our divine nature. It was present at the founding of this world and will undoubtedly be present at the final undoing of this world. It offers itself in us and to us right now and in every moment. We can surrender to it most easy and most fully by choosing into our loving. And if we find that loving more by thinking of it as our compassion, then that will do the same thing. But is that is naturally and entirely giving. It gives forth because that's all that it really is and all that it really knows. And because it is inherently fulfilled by the completeness of God's loving into itself, it allows that loving to come through itself and have an activating effect, an activating fate. Said it wrong, but that's true too, for all consciousness. And even as we surrender to this truth and allow it to activate us into our own remembrance, we can then also feel ourselves surrendering into its purpose and letting that purpose that it lives by be an active purpose in us. Even though our mind and our emotions and our ego are so full of concerns about our own well-being and our own accomplishing and our own survival and our own destiny, it calls us to a greater truth, to the greater destiny that is the destiny of our spiritual being beyond the destiny of our individuation. It is the destiny to be living love. And it is calling each of you and each of those of you who are partaking of this, who will partake of this video, to this truth that God is loving all of itself through all of itself. And since we're part of itself, God is loving the rest of itself through this part of itself. Each of you is called into this and is in the embrace of God that holds you now. I invite you to take a breath and with that breath to receive the fullness of God's loving and allow it to move through you, and through moving through you to activate into the levels in the world around you this opportunity of aliveness, of fullness, to this love being made manifest. This is the messaging of Francis of Assisi, who was one of those who came before us, opening the way for each of us to have this greater opportunity of receptivity. And in thankfulness, we do receive. Amen. We're now going to move forward to question and answers, and I'm going to turn this over to Lee, who's going to set this up for us. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to share some brief guidelines so that the sharing may continue. Questions are to be about a way of God's remembrance and what Michael has shared. To ask a question, please raise your Zoom hand. You can find that by hovering near the bottom of your Zoom window. Click on the React button. A pop-up appears. Choose Raise Hand. Please also turn on your video for full participation. If you're on a low bandwidth connection and are unable to do that, so be it. Most important, and since so many of us have had the blessing over so many years to receive so much assistance from Michael in clearing so many things, this is not that. Please do not ask questions of a personal nature and do not ask Michael for assistance in clearing. Questions are to be for your benefit, the benefit of those of us gathered, and those who will participate via the archives. We ask that you look to the integrity of your intentions before asking a question of Michael, and thank you for your cooperation. For those who are new to this gathering, new via the archives, and a reminder to us all, Michael is available for personal questions. He is available to assist with clearing, and he is available for support in coming into the greater remembrance all through the week via online sessions, sessions by phone, sessions in person. To book those, please visit awaketolove.com and click on Book an Appointment with Michael. Thank you. Finally, here is the legal consent. By raising your hand and asking questions of Michael, you are giving full consent to Awake to Love to make the audio and video of this gathering, including your sharing, available as online archives for anyone to access. Please do not raise your hand and do not share unless you are in full agreement. Thank you. Okay, Michael, 4 hands are raised at this moment.
Jane Emanuel. I can't
Please,
hear you, Jane.
you would unmute. You've got the power to do that now. Down in the bottom left where there's that microphone, it's got a red line through it. So if you click on that, that will remove the red line. There you go.
Okay, good. Hi, Michael. Thank you
Hi, Jane.
for sharing yourself with us every week. Um, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about when you knew you had this gift and how that evolved. And then I wonder why all of us don't have that gift, or can we develop it? Because there are very few on the planet that do have a gift like yours.
Wow. Well, we could probably take up a whole time talking about all that.
Reader's Digest version.
Reader's Digest version. So much to talk about. So I don't, well, I've talked some about it. Since I was a child, I've had a sensitivity to, let's say, the other world. When I was about 7 or 8, that a very cathartic experience for me where, because my parents were atheists, they took me at one point to a place where there was a cemetery, and we went out back. It was behind this building, and there were headstones and graves, and I didn't know what those were. And I was curious. My father said, those grave people are, when they die, that's where they go. And that's what happens to everyone. You die, you'll be but that'll happen to you too, and that'll be it. And I remember coming home that night, and the I was overwhelmed in my consciousness. I couldn't stop sobbing because to me, it made no sense for me to live one more minute or one more day of my life because of what was the point? If no matter what you did, it all amounted to nothing. And so, in the midst of my just terrible, terrible sobbing, something happened, and there was like a pop, and I went out of my body and I started to go up through dimensions of light. All the time, it just seemed like light, light. I knew I was going up through levels, like going up an elevator, and it went up and up and up and up and exploded into light. And I went up to later what I knew was the soul realm. And then I got taken to something beyond that. That was just this pure bright light that was almost unfathomably bright. And in that moment, I knew that I would never die. And I knew that no one dies. And I mean, I'd had experiences before then, but that one just was the one that really kind of, and I couldn't come back and talk to anybody about this because my parents were atheists. Anytime I tried to talk to them about the angels I would see and stuff, I was told there was no such thing. And it was just fantasy and imagination. And so there's a lot of things that happen with all of that. But I don't want to spend all day talking about that. I had experiences where just the extreme depth of my sensitivity, which started to open up even when I was a child, and was almost unbearable to me. I would have experiences of just feeling too much. And so I shut that down like most people did as best I could to try and cope and live. And then when I was in my late teenage years, I had a car accident when I should have died and I lived. And I came out of that and with this hunger, a metaphysical hunger. I was about 17 at the time, and sort of an insatiable hunger to know. And I had other experiences of traveling out of my body. There's just a lot of things happening, but it just came about. And I had a healing of a scoliosis in my back when I was 21, where just tremendous emotional release, and my spine that was very twisted, and doctors said will always be that way within, I don't know what it took, an hour or an hour and a half of that time of this tremendous release. A couple of days later, when I went to the doctor, they said, your spine's perfect. And I was inspired at that moment, and I offered my life to God to help people go have what I had had. So that's kind of what had happened. I got involved with a person who was my teacher, John Roger, who I know there's people on this call that also studied with him. And I had been looking at teachers and gurus and Zen masters and yogis from the time I was 17. I was going around just visiting with them, but something different happened with him. And because I was raised as an atheist, I had no openness to the Christian stuff, particularly. I was open to all the Indian stuff and the Buddhist stuff because my parents' resistance was to the thing they had known and they had felt, let's say, deceived by, which was the church. So and when I met John Roger and I shook his hand, I had an overwhelming experience of opening where Jesus appeared and just took me up. And I remember collapsing on the spot and going into an ecstasy that lasted for days and days. And through that, I got involved with a group called MSIA, the Movement of Spiritual and Awareness, which was one of the organizations he had started. And it was interesting because I was actually very doubting of it still, because see, I was raised by scientists as a father and my mother, and so I doubted everything, even though I was having all these experiences. At one point, they had a thing they offered called to be a minister, like, and I like that idea of giving. I was very attracted to that. I was very called to give. So I did that. And within the act of the ministry, there was an action there where they gave a blessing. at the end of it. And there was a part of the blessing towards the end of the blessing where it basically said, well, there's a special blessing placed upon your joy, that it may awaken the spontaneity and the brilliance of your inner knowing. Well, I had already been working with people, but my work at that point was mostly I would just kind of touch people. I didn't talk that much at that up till then. I was starting to, but I was so shy. I was so introverted. And so, but when I would touch people, extraordinary things would happen. But there's a lot of people on this call that didn't really realize that because they didn't know me back then. About the only person who really found out the power of my touching was my teacher, John Roger, one day when he was in pain. And I'd never told him about that. He was in pain. I said, well, let me see what I can do. I put my hands on him and his pain went away. Which after that, he was very interested in me, not only talking to him, but touching him. Anyway, I don't know if this is interesting to people or boring, but so it came about like that. Long story short, I woke up more and more. I'm just debating inside, in a sense, debating with the spirit about how much to actually tell you about this. Okay, part of why I can do the things I do the way I do it is also because there is a consciousness that works through me. It's been around me all my life, but it was never really, it was always there, but I was kind of asleep to it. And as I grew, I became more awake to it and it started to come through me more and more. And it was a consciousness that I actually heard about when I was about 21 years old, but I didn't necessarily believe it because I heard it from somebody who just told it to me, and didn't really have a lot of confidence in myself then. I mean, I kept touching people, and amazing things would happen, and every time I would do it, I didn't believe it. That's how doubtful my process was. And every time I'd go to work on somebody, the voice in my head would say, "It's not going to work this time. You shouldn't be doing this. You don't know what you're doing. It's not going to work." But something me say, "Well, I'll just love them." And I would do that, and I'd hear this guidance inside to do this, and all these neat things would happen. And then I started to talk, and then all this information would come. And so, in some ways, I came to realize, but only later, that what was happening is that there was an alignment of spirit, a consciousness that had a great connection, a great alignment to the spirit that was using me, that was greater than me as a personality and greater even me as the one I thought I was. And it, in a sense, interfaced with my consciousness. And the advantage of that is it was a consciousness that had also already transcended this world. And so because it already transcended this world, it had access to the spirit world. And because of that, it also understood not only what was knowable from the spiritual world, but how to both get into the spirit world, but also how to bring down from the spirit world blessings from the spiritual world. And this consciousness was a consciousness that was very aligned to Jesus. It was one of the consciousness of one of the disciples named Bartholomew. And so, though I had actually been told by somebody when I was 21 or 22 that they believed I was that person, I didn't believe it. But it was later when I had an experience with my teacher, John Roger, where some things were shared with me that were word for word what had been shared for me when I was 21 or 22. I suddenly realized, oh, this must be that Bartholomew thing that I've been ignoring for all these years. And so then I brought it up to John Roger, and he said it was true. And I said, well, am I the reincarnation of this Bartholomew? And he said, no, you're not the reincarnation of it, but it overshadows you and works through you and is connected to you, similar to the way how high self is connected to people. So a lot of how I do is through that consciousness. Why? Because it's a consciousness that transcended creation in another time, but because of its commitment to the work of the lifting of the planet, or what we might call I don't like this word. I don't using this word. I don't mean it in a religious context. We could say the Christing of the planet, but it's not the religious Christing. It is the shifting of the planet in terms of how the planet works, in terms of that karma will get worked here under grace rather than under karmic law, which is my experience and understanding of the deeper teaching, the deeper messaging, the deeper gift of what Jesus was one of the primary people bringing, not the only one, but a primary messenger of, was that we can have this opportunity that if we will learn from our experiences, we can then be open to grace and forgiveness, and we can have an expedited movement of awakening rather than being caught in this almost interminable process of an eye for an eye. So I think I've said a whole lot more than I intended.
It's very very interesting to me, and I guess you it appears as though you were chosen when you
Well,
came in.
okay, sure, I think that's true, but yes, chosen, but also, I chose back. But the thing is that in coming awake, and yes, I think I have a great advantage in coming awake because I'm interfacing with something that's always awake. And so for me, when I call it a way of God's remembrance, it's very much I call it a way of God's remembrance because in a lot of ways I just let go and suddenly I remembered. And so, but what I realized in that moment is that it's the same truth for everybody. When everybody is always divine, everybody is always the divine being having the human experience. Every soul, everyone here, we think we'll get back and we'll become part of God again. No, you're always part of God. It's just there's an amnesia. And when I came into the remembrance of this and the oneness of God, that was the most startling thing, is the knowing that I had never been apart from God, that I'd always been one with God, but I had an extended part of my essence into form. And that part of my essence that got into form, it's sort of like drifted off, like somebody doing this, and then came back awake and I go, oh, right, I forgot. I drifted into forgetfulness. So I'm
So
still in this world very much offering this messaging of what is possible and what is so. And I don't do this. See, when I'm talking about me doing this, I feel like I'm lying because what I do is I just get out of the way and I let this other consciousness move through and our other consciousness move through that have this clarity. In my humanness, I feel just as befuddled by this earth as any other person. But I realized I kept blocking it because I kept thinking I had to improve my humanness to be, in a sense, deserving of being somebody who offers guidance and messaging. In the spirit world, they just said, no, we don't care about anything like that. We love you entirely as you are, even if you don't love you as entirely as you are. But you will learn to do that. But for now, let us love you and let us love through you. that the Father's will may be done. And something me said, I will.
So for those who at times wish they could have that gift too, is that something that can be developed, or is it a burden
Sure,
at
but
times? Or
I wouldn't seek to develop it. I would seek remembrance.
okay,
And then you will find that this gift and really all the gifts of the Spirit come from remembrance. The greater the remembrance, the more the gifts of the Spirit appear. You can develop psychic abilities. And what do you do that? By focusing on existence through, let's say like this, the soul exists in other levels of reality, which we could call other dimensions, which we could call metaphysical or psychic material worlds. And so, but since the soul has existence in those fields, the soul also has an energy form that it uses to work into those different dimensions of creation. And so the more you, in a sense, look at creation through the energy field that the soul is holding in the different dimensions, the more you develop an ability to see reality as it is perceivable by the soul through that energy filter, really through the distortions of that particular level. So let's say you were looking through a very mental level, you could gain a kind of clairvoyance, but there would always be a level of distortion. To me, that wouldn't be the gifts I'm talking about. There would be a gift that would be many people would want, that could be useful, could be valuable in this world, and could help you to do good things here. But it could also create a lot of karma with it if you're not careful. I'm not interested in those gifts because I've had all those gifts in other lives. So I sought those things and I got very good at those things. And they didn't give me what I needed or wanted. So as best I can, I try and stay out of that and just go into what I call the divine unknowing, which is I just go into this peace and see what the Spirit brings forth. I recommend that
okay.
as the higher option. You've had quite a few lifetimes where you've sought for metaphysical ability. It's funny, in this lifetime, by the grace of God, a lot of your metaphysical abilities have been blocked in you so that you'd have a better chance of getting beyond the metaphysical and getting into the true spiritual.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Well,
You're very kind, gentle soul.
yeah, I hope it was worth you having that answer.
Yeah.
But yes, wake up to who you are, and anything and everything is available to that. It's kind of like you plug into God and there's nothing God doesn't know. So the more plugged in you are to God, the more God's knowing comes through you. Oh, now we like the ability to have it because we can have it as an individual. The way you get God's ability is you give up your individuality. You let go, you let God. So I'm talking about it like it's my ability, but all along those abilities came through me, not from me. Even back when I was touching people, I had no idea what I was doing, except I would put my hands on them. I'd love them.
Mm.
And just so many things happened. Because if we're willing, God, which is love, will come through us if we will surrender and allow that. And that loving may come through it as an energetic of healing, but it could also become words that are healing, to become guidance. So let go and let God. There's a lot more you can do here. Sometimes, see, it's a strange phenomena that we seek and seek and seek life after life to become more and more, to become more worthy of God and more able to be God's servant by doing more of the godly things. But at some point, something in us will, in a sense, come to the realization that this isn't working. It's like this endless process of trying to acquire more ability, and something collapses. And I can remember when that collapsed in me, and even in this life when it collapsed, I just had this deep knowing that this would fail because I had such a sense of having done this so many lifetimes, and somehow it was never enough. And so it is the reverse of the approach of somehow acquiring more ability and developing it. If you could look back at my lives and see all the things I did to develop those abilities, and the realization that all those abilities, while impressive to the world, were not the fruit of a connection to God. They are the fruit of a connection to the magnetic empowerment that the world offers. And it was startling to realize that. And the only way I could have what God had to offer is I had to give up the world. And so I did. Thank you for your question. Bless you.
Thank you.
Was there anybody else that wanted to share? I have no idea. Not like questions today, huh?
We have 3 hands up, Cindy, Kelly, and Aaron.
Okay, we'll do Cindy.
Okay.
What's up?
You know, recently a, a question has come into my mind that never came into my mind before. And that was the question of God. Where did God come from? How did God get created? How did all that happen? Do you have any input on that? I mean, how did the manifestation of this of divinity, of all things, come about?
Well, there's different questions in there.
Yeah.
The biggest question you asked is, I don't know. I don't know the absolute origin of God. I do not. And that's not been revealed to me. So the answer is, I don't know. And
Mhm.
often when I say I don't know, suddenly things are revealed, but so far that's not revealed. Um, the There is a sense that makes sense to me, but I don't know it, that we could think of almost like God is like the consciousness of this spirit that be that focalized itself in some way to to explore its capacity to create, its capacity to individuate, its capacity to manifest in different and distinct ways. I have looked very much into those manifestations of the distinctions of reality that God has created, many dimensions and universes. And not that I've looked in depth, but I've looked in enough that I know they're real, and I know that they're there, and I know that this isn't the first creation. This isn't the first manifestation of a universe that's happened, but there's been earlier ones that were part of God's purpose. It's one of those things I would say, well, come fully awake to God and be in the totality of God, and maybe it'll get answered for you. But I can pretty much assure you that when you get into that place with God, you aren't going to care.
Don't care. Well, I don't care that much, but it just is a thought that I'd never had before to ask that kind of question. So
Ask God that question.
I'll ask. That's a great idea. Thank you. Hmm. I will and see what comes forward. And
Yeah.
it's not really that important because we're doing God, period. That's the,
No, 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 no. I'm gonna right there. I'm gonna suggest to you, you have an opportunity to understand this on a deeper level.
okay,
We're not doing God. God is doing us.
that's true. I said that wrong, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. God is doing all of this. There is only God. And we are manifestations, facets, appearances of that. When I'm in the oneness of God, there's a timeless, eternal sense to it.
Mhm.
So if there was anything before or any time it wasn't, I have no sense of it, but I don't know. But thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh boy, let's see here. I can never remember who I've called on before. Let's do Aaron Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Yeah, hi.
Um, I from your message at the beginning, um, I my consciousness was focusing on going further with the receiving, opening and receiving the fullness of God's loving,
Hmm.
and also ex being more present in the peace that you described as well.
It looks like that started happening for you. Did you experience that?
I did experience that to a degree, and as you were guiding us through that.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that and the spirit's just showing me that there was an opening for you. So you had that intention and your intention was fulfilled. You're still looking at God and again, be God looking.
Can you?
The doubts that have limited you are not so much self-created in your mind, but adopted by in your consciousness when you came into this physical world and sought to adapt to the world. You came into this level out of a very ethereal world or reality, which was, oh, I'd say very much a dimensional world of, I'll call it symbolism. And that makes it harder to interface with this world than, one second, that makes it very hard for me to do, um, because for us for us to do, because the interface from that to here, uh, it's like you understand the world of symbols in a strange way, but you can't. But who can explain that? Who can communicate that? Because the way the minds work in this level, everything is working through sort of a sequence of logic. But symbols are more understood through Gestalt, through like a knowing, like an impression. And so that that's made you feel really out of place here. And For you, it's going to be very much about, yeah, what I talked about earlier, coming into the I don't know place, the divine unknowing. Now, the world of symbols is very difficult also because the symbols are very powerful. Are they powerful as symbols? No, they're powerful as representations of forces of magnetism, like archetypes. You know, like the gods of the Romans or the Greeks. You know, those are archetypal forms. And Carl Jung would talk about these archetypes, archetypal forces. Well, in the etheric plane of reality, it's these forces, these archetypal energies are very powerful into this world. If we can tap to the power of that ethereal unconscious world, there's great power. There's healers that are extraordinarily powerful in this world. They're tapping powers of that ethereal world, of the unconscious. There's things done that are supernatural and superpowers. So there's a part of our consciousness will want to hold to these because it's like holding on to something that in a way is potentially very useful to us. But if we hold on to those, it limits our availability to that which is beyond that ethereal reality, which we would call the soul reality or the soul realm. And the difference there is in that soul realm, there is no magnetism. It is a non-magnetic reality. We can understand karma is very much related to the magnetism of creation. And the ethereal part of creation is like the most subtle part of it. So for you, it's doing what you did tonight, but just letting it go to another level. It's interesting. I'm talking to you, but the spirit is doing more for you than I'm doing for you, but through my words, because I'm just talking about it. Well, the spirit is kind of not just showing you, but showing everybody something about the truth of all of this, because this is the truth that we all deal with in different ways. It's just more pronounced for you because where your karmic journey had taken you was into that. And so the breakthrough for you is getting beyond that. Well, you're breaking through and getting beyond it, but you can let go of it more. And then that which is beyond will be more and more present, and you'll be more and present, not just simply with it, but as it. And you being present as the soul, as an individuation of spirit, will bring a completion to your purpose and to your journey as a soul, which is what you're seeking to do. I could talk and talk and talk about it, but it's not the talking, it's the experiencing. When God knows this and God is activating us, the remembrance of this knowing. Bless you. That's what I got to
Thank
say.
you, Michael.
All right, bless
Thank
you,
you so
man.
much. God bless
Yeah.
you too.
All right. Let's see here. Oh my gosh. So many hands. No, only a couple. Good. See if we can do them both. I don't know. Kelly.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for the St. Francis stuff. That was amazing. I love St. Francis. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the mystery school that I think kind of rides up alongside what we're doing. And because I had an experience where I was at a point of testing and was in front of a door with a being and being asked question after question after question. It was really ecstatic state. But when I came out of it, I felt like it related to what we're doing. And I've always wondered about part about how is there a corresponding mystery school that we're all
There's lots of quote schools on different levels and different planes of reality, different it really just depends on where your consciousness is in its process of remembrance. Now, we could also say your process of evolvement if we want to see it from sort of the bottom up approach. I actually look at it more like God is remembering itself, and it's almost like in the spirit. It's like with the fisher when Jesus said, "I'll make you fishers of men." It's like the line is being cast into the consciousness and then extracting the conscious that's been in the water and the sleep back up into the air and the breath of the revelation of who I truly am and what I truly am. And so we could say there is a school of that taking place in the spirit, but it's like saying there's one school of learning, which is the one school of God's remembrance. And then there are different phases of it that, depending on where you're perceiving reality from or how you're perceiving reality to work, the spirit will interface with you according to your perceptual model and work with you within that. As you hold this to be reality, then you will work that level of perception till in certain time and phase you realize the limitations of that way of perceiving and to be ready to let go of it, in which case then there will be a flip and an offer to a new way of perceiving. And then you'll go into that level of perceiving. On that level of perceiving, you'll address reality that way. So you kind of call it like, well, a school of that. Like, for example, I know you, so you work with a model of the soul and then these dimensions above the soul with these different levels. But you think, and I know you've heard the idea, well, like there's 27 distinct levels. And I go, okay, well, I can vouch for that. But say, well, what's different about each level? Well, each level you could understand as a different way of perceiving reality. It is just it's a distinction, a little different way of knowing God. And it's almost like God is knowing itself through each filter, through each field of perception. And so, depending on what you're ready for, the instruction, the learning that comes to you from God through instruments of God that serve the purpose of God will be according to that. And a lot of the learning, in some ways, more than anything else, particularly if you start to go into these higher planes of reality, is you learn to see reality in the way it's known there, and then you learn to move beyond it. It's almost like saying, I'm in this dimension of spirit, of God, of whatever you want to call it, and there's an appearance of the way it is. But somewhere in that dimension of there is a singular truth of God that knows God beyond the perspective of that level. And it's with me and it's opening me to see the truth of that, and then opening me to go into a greater truth. We sometimes would call that the traveler consciousness, and that's one reason called it, because our experience from an individual level is that we are traveling into these different dimensions. But the reality is we simultaneously exist in all of it, but we're incapable of experiencing all of it because we're still quantifying our awareness by certain frames of perception in one level than another. Because that's how we're doing it. It works with us according to the way we're doing it. And so it works with us within that paradigm of perception until on a certain level ready, and then pops us into this other level of perception, another different paradigm. And we could say, well, there's a way to summarize the differences. Every level that we would say that we go higher, the differentiation is less. There's less differentiation. There's more of a sense of the infinite.
Hmm.
And you mean it's less tangible? Yeah. It's more undifferentiated. Now, as you go through the experience up through this different dimensions, there comes a point where to, in a sense, really to know that next level of perceiving or perception, and to be able to do that, you, as a soul, your capacity to do that falters. See, because the soul, though it is an extension of God and an individuation of God, it is actually a formulation God has created to deal in the differentiations in time and space. But as you start to go up into these other dimensions above the soul, you actually hit a point where to really know and perceive that dimension as it's to be known or can be known and seen, you start to know it not as a soul, but as spirit. And your soul actually starts to surrender its soulic individuation into this truth of itself as spirit, because the truth is the soul is an individuation of spirit that is done at the instruction of God to serve a purpose of God. But now God's purpose is gathering back unto itself that of itself that it has extended into time and space, and is extended into the utilization of the individual soul as a way to accomplish that. But now, as the consciousness is being returned back into the knowing of the undifferentiated levels of God, it starts to undo or free the consciousness of the soul from the soul itself. You start to know realities that's known by spirit. And eventually you go far enough in those dimensions, you get far enough up that you hit a dimension quite a ways up there where you literally your soul could be taken above it, but could have no understanding or no ability to perceive it. And at that point, the soul you'll be totally release the soul, and you would have to go up as a spirit form, as spirit itself. Okay, so I'm talking about it, but if I talk about this, the spirit is offering people an opportunity to have a sense of this and experience this. I know you're traveling like crazy inside, and it's like, well, what's going on? That's okay. It's letting you know this is because this isn't something that I have uniquely. This is something everybody has, just everybody doesn't know it. This is the truth of reality. And it's God's intention to call all aspects of itself back unto itself. That's why not one soul will be lost, because all the souls will be gathered back up in. And then eventually they'll be even undone from the soul form to be re-engaged with God as spirit itself. Okay.
Thank you. Love you. God
Love
bless.
you. Bless you.
Michael, we're at 7:40 now.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, we went over again. I'm not supposed to do that. Was that fun? Or is everybody just going, what's he talking about? Yeah, a few people are awake. We're gonna do one more, but it's gonna be quick, Richard. Quick. I don't usually do this, but I'm gonna make an exception.
Okay, and that is in reference to intercessory work and remembrance. So if we keep going up higher and higher, I know we're not going higher and higher, just so that I could describe it. If I go to the highest and highest place, while I'm doing intercessory work, does that matter? Or is it just pure intention? So in other words, I want to keep going, and then can God use me in a greater way for intercessory work? Is that quick enough?
Sure. Yes,
Okay.
God could. God could use you in a greater way.
Okay.
Now, it's not just, quote, in a sense, tapping into that greater, higher place. It is that, but then it's letting go in your conscious enough to allow that higher truth to come through. And so the work is that what we would describe, although it really doesn't work like this, we would describe it as an ascension and this coming into this remembrance. And then there's also a process of let's see this. It's allowing that to come back through. Now, the challenge is that when you really come into that level of remembrance, lots of times the soul we don't stick around because the ecstasy of those higher levels is such that you will find a lot of, mystics in the cave kind of thing because the bliss of it is so complete that it's not like they're against helping. They're just so intoxicated with that bliss. The fact they're in the world and on the planet, that alone helps lift the consciousness. The more you can come to that and come into that, if you really come to that and realize that there is no you. See, it's not just having an experience, it's the surrendering of the experiencer. There is just what is. And if you can really, really let yourself be undone, Jesus said it really clearly. He said, of myself, I can do nothing. It is the Father through me doing his own work who accomplishes all things. So, of myself. So he said, the Father and I are one. Now, he wasn't just doing a semantical thing of saying, I know I'm part of God. He was saying, he'd come into the remembrance, come into the knowing that God is in everything always, and God in everything and everyone always. And in that knowing of that, he was, see, I'm lying, the language lies. He let go of the self of Jesus and was just the Father. And in that, whatever the Father wanted to do, because he still held on to this form, the physical reality, and was still corporal, it allowed that force of God to do God's will through that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that was a lot because I was explaining to it and they were showing in the spirit how that worked. That's a little bit more tangibly than I've seen them demonstrate that. So that's kind of cool. Well, I think that's a good way to end.
And I love you and I thank you.
All right. Well, bless you all. Thank you. I'm going to say a quick prayer to say good night. Thank you for joining on the way of God's remembrance. Thank you, dear Lord, for blessing us all with your presence. And thank you, St. Francis, for visiting. I'm very thankful to be able to serve with you once again. And may your work and your will be done in us and through us all. And when we all come into the greater remembrance and be servants of this purpose as it lives in this world, may Christ Jesus' work be accomplished. May John Rogers' work be accomplished as they serve that same intent. May we all be available to be used in whatever way we can, recognizing it is much less about what we do and much more about where we do it from. So let us each and every one of us be done by God and know that the Father does the work through us. Bless us all. Amen. Have a wonderful night. Bless you all. Thank you for coming. Bye-bye.